First of all, thank you all so much for coming. This is going to be a special evening with Kathy here and her campaign manager Taylor and our panelists who are going to introduce themselves. But we love this good crowd. We're so pleased to see you all here. It'll be a very informative night, and we will appreciate your participation. So thank you again for coming. I'm Marcia Ridley and
Leslie Bearden, and I just want to add that we've handed out cards to any of you that wanted one, or if you haven't gotten one, please let me know. If you have any questions, just give them to me and we'll bring them up to the panel. So, okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for coming. This is a great turnout. Leslie and Marcia will not say this themselves, but they organized this entire event. So, yes, thank you. Early on in the campaign, we threw out a call for anyone who wanted to organize a forum in their community to jump on a conference call with us, which was a big ask of folks. And people like Leslie and Marcia jumped on the call and said, we'll do it. And I'm grateful for their bravery. So we'll go ahead and get started. My name's Taylor. I have the pleasure of being Kathy Ellis's campaign manager, so you all will see me probably too many times throughout the next year and a half. But I'll let our lovely panelists go ahead and introduce themselves, and we'll start with Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Ellis, and I'm running for the Missouri 8th Congressional District. As most of you know, this is my second time around, and the first run was my opportunity to learn things. And I learned a lot about the 8th District. I learned about some of the issues that we have. I learned about some of the pain and suffering that exists in our district. And I once again decided, as I was thinking about running the second time, that I was not going to leave this alone. I was going to once again run so that we can better get the needs of our district met. So I'm very glad that I did. For those of you who don't know me, I have been a licensed clinical social worker and a trauma and addiction counselor for over 30 years. And I'm still working a couple of days a week. And that has truly been one of my great joys in my life, because I see people get the help that they need. And as I was reflecting about the way that social workers see things and the way that people in politics do, sometimes they're very different, and sometimes there's a lot of connection. Because what I do as a clinician is that I listen, I organize, I ask the questions of the individual about what they need. I work with them to help find a solution to that. And then, God willing, we have someone that becomes more empowered. I think that a good public servant is very mindful of all of those qualities. And that's the way I'd like to look at what this job in Congress would be. And it's going to be social work. It's going to be listening. It's going to be responding to what your needs are, not mine. It's going to make sure that we will have the things that need to be corrected, that will be done. And out of that, we become more empowered. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here tonight. It is always a great pleasure, and I'm always reminded that we have people that really want good things for us in this country and don't want to tear it down. So thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Ashley Brooks. I serve as the Executive Director at the Rolla Mission. I don't know how to follow that. I didn't have anything prepared like that. I have been involved with the mission for about 3 years now. When I first started as a volunteer, I had never been in a homeless shelter before, and my experience with people that are homeless involved just passing them on the street and occasionally giving them money or food, or just offering a quick prayer. And then when I started at the mission, I just fell in love with everyone that I was serving, and have continued to fall more in love every day. And I'm so grateful to be serving as the director now for about 2 years. and I enjoy it. So thank you for allowing me to be here tonight.
Hello. Oh. I'm usually very loud, so I don't always know how to use a microphone. But hello, my name is Rachel Schneider. By day, I'm a faculty member at Missouri S&T, where I teach engineers how to write. My new cool night job is that I'm a city council member representing Ward 1. I decided almost a year ago now, in thinking about public service and what it can mean and bring to a community. My grandfather was the mayor of his own small town, as well as the city council member, church board, school board representative. And so the kind of idea of being able to contribute to my community, not only by preparing the students at S&T to be civic leaders, but by actually showing up, knocking doors, talking to people, and kind of helping to serve the community as a city council member. That's kind of how I guess I came here to be today, and I guess why Leslie asked me to come up here. So I'm looking forward to the conversation we're all going to have. Thank you.
Okay, so we are here to talk about income inequality. It's a huge topic, which is why Leslie and Marcia chose it. We can go lots of different directions. So the way we've structured this, we have some questions that we're going to ask of our panel, but really we're here because we'd like you all to ask questions of our panel. Clarification questions, questions you have, questions about what we can do, whatever direction your mind takes you. So you all have been given cards. I'm just going to reiterate what Leslie said. If at any point you would like to hand one of those cards in, you can stick it up in the air. They'll come around and grab it from you. We're going to sort of integrate those into this conversation here. So we do not want this to be just us talking at you for the next hour or so. Please, please, please engage. I promise we're fun and we will not call on you. So I'm just going to start generally. Ashley, can you talk a little bit about, for those of us who don't know, what does the mission do? Who do you serve? What type of work do you all do generally?
Okay. So the Rolla mission is a nonprofit here in town that seeks to serve people that are experiencing homelessness or living in poverty by offering some of those bottom tier in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those needs. Like we offer free meals, we offer shelter during the winter, we have a free laundromat, we have a shower, we have hygiene supplies, and we also offer case management and referrals to resources. We serve people here in the Raleigh community, and it's like 30% of the people that we serve are veterans. Most of them are within that 18 to 65 age range, 80% are. And it's just people that have fallen on hard times. 55% were living here in Rolla when they became homeless. And of those other 45%, they came here because of a job offer, or family in the area, or they were discharged from the hospital but didn't have any place to go after that. And even some came for school. And so we see all sorts of different stories and what has led people to enter through our doors. But I always say, like, we try to untie the knot that has led them to get it to where they are, because when you're homeless, sometimes your problems are just so complicated and multifaceted. So we just try to kind of untie that knot with them and figure out what has happened and how we can help them get out of that.
Keep in mind as you're asking questions, you've got someone from the federal level, someone at the local level, and someone working at the nonprofit level. So you've got a variety of different perspectives here on this big topic. So Rachel, similar question for you. Can you talk a little bit about your ward, what issues are facing it? You talked a little bit about this earlier.
Yeah, so the first ward, if any of you aren't sure where that is, right, it's the neighborhood, includes the neighborhoods right below downtown. It includes the neighborhoods east of campus up to the railroad tracks, and then the neighborhoods kind of the shoebox factory kind of neighborhood, the Schumann Bear Wand sort of area, right? And it's a great old neighborhood, right? Those houses have been there forever. A lot of originally single-family homes. But that neighborhood's one that's in transition at this point, right? Not only because there's a lot of sort of development that's encouraging students, but also because we're sort of seeing some shifts in terms of the population of that neighborhood. In some cases, the owner-occupants are getting a little bit older, right? There's a lot more people who are either on sort of fixed incomes in that neighborhood or are getting older and are kind of struggling to sort of keep up with their property and developing their property. There's, what else is there that I need to remember? Oh, yeah, and then there's just a kind of the mix of, you know, new people moving into the neighborhood, so that there's a lot of sort of change. There's also some older homes that are no longer occupied, right, in the neighborhood, where development will probably enter in, but hasn't had the opportunity to yet. So it's kind of a mix of needs, but there is definitely, it is a, relative to the many prosperous neighborhoods in Rolla, it's a little more economically depressed than some of the others.
Kathy, same question for you. Can you talk a little bit about, we're in Rolla, a portion of the 8th district, but you've got 30 counties. Can you talk a little bit about the economic situation of the 8th? That's a huge question, but.
Well, we're still the 11th poorest district in the country, closing in on 10. So that's not a very good thing. You know, it's so much variety in this district. If you take a line and you draw it down the middle of the district, you're going to find very different sides. You're going to see the folks that are in soybeans and cotton and rice on one side, and you're going to see timber and cattle on the other. And we found that in the last time around when I ran that the Missouri Dems were trying to come up with farm policy, but it had more of the eastern part of the district than it did the western, and that caused a little bit of trouble. And I encouraged Stephen Weber, who was the director at the time, to go down to the western and see if he could get some information from those folks too, so that they would be included. So it's a very different area. There is extreme poverty in the Boot Heel, and what we're looking at is a huge mother-infant mortality rate. Now, why is that happening? Guess what? We've got hospitals closing. And the ones that are there, there's a small hospital in Caruthersville that looks like it came out of something of a 1950s TV show. Because the only big piece of equipment they actually had was a machine, I think it was an x-ray machine that was secondhand. So we see that abject poverty in those areas. But we also see a whole lot of people that are very, very isolated throughout the whole southern part of that district, who by the very nature of where they live, they have to travel great lengths to even get any food. But then we also come upon the food deserts because the food's not healthy. So we have so many issues in the district, including the opioid crisis, including schools shutting down, so they've only got 4 days that they're actually in classrooms because they don't have enough money to keep it going. We've got every kind of healthcare issue that you can imagine. Most people in the lower part of the district have to go at least 2 hours to get any health care. So we are in the northern part. I live in Festus in Jefferson County. Even though it looks like we have the fast food restaurants, we have Lowe's, we have, you know, grocery stores, if you go 5 miles from there, you're going to see poverty. You're going to see people who just can't make it. And sometimes they leave their houses. Sometimes they burn down because of making meth. And sometimes they just disappear. So it's a very, very diverse, very challenging county. And there are so many things that we could do if we had, first of all, consensus about what we need to do and input from the people there. And I think that the reality of it is we have so many issues. The biggest one that is killing our district, and I use that very carefully, there's an article that was written about, where the districts are dying. Missouri is a dying state. If we have that kind of a condition, what can we do to make a difference? How can we change that? And the greatest thing that I think is something that people need to have is hope. And I see very, very little hope in the 8th district. And that's one thing that I think we need to look at. How does something then become, if I can work for this, then I might be able to do this. So we have a lot of work to do. We are all invested in where we live. And every person in here can be a part of a solution. And if we can find what that solution is, I think it's going to be a very different story. It's still going to take a lot of time, but it's going to be a different story.
Thank you all. Kathy, you mentioned this a bit. I'm going to open this up to all of you. Someone asked, how do Americans afford the rising cost of healthcare? Healthcare is an interesting intersection of the income inequality, and all of you are seeing that at some different level. Could you talk about the healthcare situation and, this person is asking, how do we combat that? But maybe just generally what you see in your different spaces. You can start with whoever.
So for me, what I'm seeing, I can't comment at the national level or anything, but a lot of the people that come in, one of the first questions we ask is, do you have insurance, do you have Medicaid or anything? And the majority of the time the answer to that question is no, which has led them to not being on medication that is vital to them, whether it's for diabetes or some other illness that needs a medication for, or they need to be seeing a physician. So we are, most of the time, our efforts are initially just kind of trying to get them some sort of insurance. And thankfully, here in Rolla, we have a clinic that you can go to without insurance. It's based off of a sliding income scale, but not everyone has that. And so we're really blessed to have that here in town. But yeah, so that's what we're seeing. The majority of people do not have insurance. I mean, especially private insurance. It's not affordable.
Yeah. Well, as a state employee, I have to say personally, I'm very lucky to have good insurance through my work, right? But what I have seen in my family at different points in time, despite the fact that my father is a doctor in Jeff City, there have been lots of people in my immediate family who have not had to go without health insurance for a while. And in fact, my mother actually had to declare bankruptcy at one point because she had substantial medical debt. She had to go into the hospital for her diverticulitis at a time when she didn't have health insurance because she was working as a temp employee without. So I've been able to see how dramatic the differences can be and how much that really does affect a person's ability to sort of thrive and to be financially independent when, in some cases, medical debt in this country is pretty substantial and serious.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere that the number of bankruptcies are up again as far as any mental, any health issues.
Yeah.
People are having to do it because of that. I sit on, I'm actually the vice chair of a board, the Community Mental Health, or Community Health Center, Comprehensive Community Health Center, which we have here, we have throughout the district and throughout the state. What we've done in Jefferson County since about 2011 is that we have become a federally qualified health center. And as a result of that, we have expanded, so we went from being primarily mental health. We have been a mental health agency since the early 70s. And so we began to see primary care patients, dental patients, behavioral health, and drug and alcohol. We now have moved those services into 4 of our school districts. So the kids don't have to leave school. They can walk down the aisle and see the dentist sometimes for the first time. And we are required as a federal qualified health center is that if they don't have money, they are still seen. So I think that is one thing that we can do that can be a very dramatic change throughout our district, and that is to expand all of these. We have sites that some do dental and some do primary care and some do behavioral health, but they're kind of far between. If we can have the comprehensive centers and put the money into those places, I think we can serve the needs of the people so much better. And I know that this is a pretty much a bipartisan issue. People across the aisle are very much concerned about how do you meet the needs of these people in rural areas, and they are very strong advocates of it. So I think that's one of the things that we can possibly do through our primary care office in Jefferson City to bring more money down from the federal level to let people access more health care. That's just one solution, and I think there are many that can tie into that.
So someone just texted me a question. They're watching live, and so that's exciting. We are live streaming. I was like, who is bugging me? So they would like to know, can we talk a little bit about the minimum wage? Is it a living wage? What solutions do you all propose? What issues are you seeing in your different sectors regarding minimum wage?
Okay, so here's a piece of information in some of my research that I found. If we increase the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, to $10.10, that would lift 4.6 million people out of poverty. That's pretty impressive.
So just from what we've seen, minimum wage, the average rent in Rolla, I should know this off the top of my head, but I think it's like $700 a month. And that is just not affordable if you're living on minimum wage. And especially for families, what we see a lot is that if you're a family with young children, then they can't afford daycare. So mom has to, by default, stay at home with the children. And so that means that dad goes and works. And then if he's only making minimum wage or just above that, that's just not enough for a family to live on, much less grow or get in any sort of financial comfort. And so that is something that we see a lot. Like, people are working even when they're homeless, but it's still not enough to get by. And sometimes when you're homeless, you're starting from way back. You're not even starting on the line and going forward, because you've got to start completely over. So if you're working, you're trying to save up this money, but then you're trying to pay off past debts or save up enough money to even pay for that first month's rent, the electric deposit, and all that other stuff. That takes, minimum wage is it's just not enough. It's not enough.
Yeah, well, one thing that actually came up, we had a meeting here locally for my neighborhood, since we're doing the city's working on a neighborhood development plan, which is a really great first step, I think, to really thinking through how we can grow the neighborhood. And one of the things that sort of came up was that actually there were a number of students who showed up to the meeting, and one of the things that they pointed out is that, well, there are some of them who have financial supports from home, but there are a lot of them who are working 20, 30 hours a week in addition to going to school in order to pay for their regular expenses, right? They have to pay their rent, they have to pay their food, their transportation, etc. And they were sort of like, well, we see ourselves as really a part of Rolla and a part of the Rolla community, because we're contributing not only by spending our tax dollars here, but by the work that we do in this community. And it's one of those things that you don't always think about, but yeah, there's a lot of people who are struggling to sort of make ends meet in a variety of different circumstances.
That's okay. Actually, you brought this up, but one thing that someone else had asked about is, can we talk a little bit about the intersection with this issue with childcare, education, jobs? A lot of people have asked, okay, income inequality is this massive topic. What does it look like in regards to childcare, jobs, education, housing, all these different topics? So I'll just open it up there. Whoever wants to.
Well, one of the things that I think we have to look at is that when we have children need education. They need care. And one of the easiest ways to do that is having pre-K. And, that's one of the things that was recommended in a lot of the research that I did, is if we have kids that are in pre-K, pre-kindergarten, that accelerates their growth tremendously. And it begins that process of getting them out of poverty. We're talking about having children whose needs are met. I think the other thing is, I was reading something, we were having a forum on childcare, and just the cost of childcare, they did from the highest to the lowest. And in Washington, D.C., per year, per child, it was almost $25,000. In Missouri, it was $8,400. And in Mississippi, which was the lowest, it was $4,400. So that's a lot of money wherever you are in whatever state. So how can we provide the opportunity for parents to work and to not have to work sequential jobs throughout the day just to make ends meet? Have jobs that have benefits and have children that are well taken care of and well educated.
Well, just to kind of connect what you said about education sort of to our local environment here, right? One of the things that I think we're really lucky to have in Rolla is we have a really great public school system here. There's a lot of sort of opportunities for children to have a number of kind of great educational opportunities at the K-12 level, right? Because we've got all those great robotics teams, we've got all these great sort of service learning projects, right? There was just one at Truman where the kids were raising money for the animal shelter here, right? We've got all of those opportunities, and one of the things that I think where local government really can help with income inequality, right, is that the more that the community supports a strong K-12 system, right, that's going to help people be able to move up and be able to prepare them for better jobs later on in their lives.
I'm a little nervous. I'm normally much more chatty.
Just where you talk about how expensive daycare is for your kids.
Well, I mean, it did occur to me. So I do know from experience that daycare in Rolla is about $125 a week per child. So my husband and I both work. He's a school teacher, and I obviously work at the Mission. And that's hard, having even one kid in daycare. And so some of the families that we see, like, they want to work, they want to get out there, but they just can't afford it. Just personally, we've always been in that position too, where it's like daycare has always been a cost. And then even just with pre-K, you talk about that. And with a lot of children in kindergarten now, like pre-K has almost become like a prerequisite. And so getting your children into a program like that and stuff is just an additional cost. That's
Someone had asked a question beforehand about one cause that they saw maybe is that there's a rise in part-time jobs and fewer, as someone was mentioning this earlier, fewer full-time jobs with benefits, et cetera. Are you all seeing that in your communities? Are you seeing that with your clients? Are you seeing that in the eighth?
Well, one of the things that I'm seeing is that even in places like McDonald's, they have now these kiosks that you can push all the buttons and order whatever you want, which, in my opinion, takes about 5 times as long as going to the counter. And I'm thinking, what are you doing to a rural area when you take away the jobs that through this automation? I mean, yes, we all have to have automation, but when the rural areas are struggling, why would you do this? This is somebody that maybe this was their only job, or their hours get cut back, or whatever happens. So we do these things that it looks like, oh, that's a great idea, but we never look at the collateral damage. And we sure don't look at the collateral damage to rural areas. That's the last one that gets looked at.
Yes, so
Right.
someone had mentioned that there's a
Full-time.
rise in part-time jobs and an
Yes.
increase in
Yes,
full-time jobs.
I got
Thank you.
so caught up in listening to her, I kind of forgot.
Yeah, no, I forgot to.
Yeah, so the majority of people that we see, you know, the full-time job is ideal because with those you get benefits, but especially if you don't have a degree higher than a high school diploma, then getting a full-time job is hard. It's very hard. And then most of those part-time jobs, they will pay about minimum wage or just a little above that. So I would say like the vast majority of people that I see on a daily basis have part-time jobs or they're working several part-time jobs trying to get by.
Okay. Now that I had a chance to answer. Yeah, well, one other thing too is that as the economy is changing, right, and there's this sort of interest in finding this adaptability, right? You have the rise of these more temporary jobs or sort of, or what used to be temp to perm jobs, right? You go work for a temp agency, maybe you can become a full-time employee, and then you just never kind of get there, right? Or the kinds of contractor jobs. I've had some friends in other places, not here in Rolla, who have spent a year, 2 years, 3 years working, you know, for a company like Facebook where they're a contracted employee, so they don't have access to benefits, despite the fact that they're doing work very similar to what the other employees are doing, right? And, you know, they've all been good so far, knock on wood, but the more that happens for more people, right, the more there are opportunities for, you know, bad luck to happen and people fall through the cracks, as Ashley has talked about very eloquently.
Ashley, I have a follow-up question for you. One thing that sometimes we hear about when talking about income inequality and people accessing like the social safety net, they'll say, well, I don't understand why they just don't get a job. And you said it's really hard to get a job. So can you talk a little bit about like maybe some of the barriers that your clients face when trying to get jobs?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we really focus on is helping people find jobs that want to work. And so we work directly with the Missouri Career Center here in town, and then they have a person there that his job is to help people with high barriers to employment overcome those barriers. And some of those are they don't have ID or any sort of identifying documents, because when you're homeless, those documents are lost really easily. I have a house and I lose those documents sometimes. They don't have a high school diploma. They have a felony. All of those things create a significant barrier to finding employment. So we really focus on those people and trying to help them find a job that's the right fit, teach them how to answer those questions in an interview, and write these letters that kind of explain their situation that can help them overcome that barrier. And we even sit down with people and help them fill out job applications. We have a computer there. And a lot of times, it's just confusing. The questions are, I have a degree in human resources, and sometimes I get confused by those questions. So sometimes it's just sitting trying to help them answer some of those questions.
I'd like to talk a little bit about a particular population of homeless people, and that is mental health patients. And one of the things that is the greatest to getting a full-time job is just what happens when you're mentally ill. If you have bipolar disorder, then you're going to fluctuate from depression to mania, to having a manic episode, none of which are very conducive to having a sustainable kind of work. So that's one of the most difficult things, is to get people stabilized enough so that they can work. I had a young woman that I was working with, and she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. She had been a math teacher, and so as her symptoms became worse, she had to stop working. And fortunately, she was not quite old enough to get enough of a pension to live on, but she got some money. And the only job that she could really do, she knew how to swim, and so she became a person that worked at the YMCA, and she was watching the pool lifeguard and things like that. And so we also want to look at what happens to us just from mental illness. Now we know a lot of catastrophic illnesses can create the same issues. But you know, when you look at someone who's mentally ill, one day they may be fine, the next day they may not. And if somebody's looking for consistency in work, that person's going to be the first to go. So we have to look across the spectrum of what all the issues are that people need when they do get to that point of homelessness. Fortunately, she has not. You know, that there are so many factors that are in place. How do we address those needs so people, if they can work, are able to work with the understanding is it's going to have to be different than what everybody else does.
And mental illness, I mean, a lot of people, I think there is this stigma that everyone that's homeless is mentally ill. So I try to tread on the topic lightly because I don't want to ever give that impression. But I will say, and when I was talking earlier about how important having health insurance is when someone has a mental illness that is undiagnosed or untreated, that wreaks havoc on their life. Even depression, we've had people come in that were successful engineers. We had a guy come in, he had had a car accident, lost his family in that accident, became very depressed, and lost his job and was living in a shack by the river. I mean, it was just, and then like we had people come in, this guy, he graduated from the university here, became an engineer in California, and at around 21, schizophrenia set in, and he didn't know it was schizophrenia, and this voice was telling him to quit his job and to come back here. And so when he came in, he had no idea that he had schizophrenia. He just knew that there was someone telling him to quit his job and to come back here. And so that's just, I mean, it can wreak havoc on people's lives, and I don't think they realize just even how much even depression, anxiety, even some of those like that are seen as like more common mental illnesses, those can really wreak havoc if they're untreated.
Yeah, I see some of this with the student populations that I work with, right? For them, it's a lot of depression and anxiety, and sometimes it's sometimes you see people who have spectrum disorders, right? And they struggle to communicate, right? And that can be a barrier for them.
I have a question for the two of you.
Yeah.
So what would happen if we had, instead of having a plan where if somebody is working in a job and their employer pays for their health care, and they become depressed, they become whatever, they lose that job, they lose that health care, okay? If we had universal health care, what difference would that make in the people that you see?
Well, I think anytime someone has more access to health care and their doctors and their medication, that's always better. Absolutely.
Yeah, seconded. It just makes people able to be more productive, more functional in their lives and all aspects of their lives, their family, their work, etc.
Sorry. My thoughts are coming in first tonight. So when I first started at the mission, there was this gentleman there named Mark who was a type 1 diabetic, and when he lost his job, he lost his insurance, and he had an insulin pump installed, and that pump was removed. And so whenever he came to the mission, he was maintaining his diabetes by drinking Mountain Dew at different parts of the day to kind of keep his blood sugar going, which, as you can imagine, led to a lot of ambulance trips. And so, we just see all the time whenever somebody loses their job and loses benefits, it can wreak havoc.
Yeah. And that brings up another issue. When you're talking about income inequality, you're talking about the inability to pay for transportation, which is a huge thing. We did a study of, and along with the other stakeholders in the county, about what was the biggest obstacle to having patients who were being treated for diabetes come back for their their second visit to make sure that everything was going all okay. And the number one thing was transportation. Now, in some areas where there are cities or there are larger towns, you have more access to transportation. But if you're out in the middle of nowhere, you're not going to find an Uber. You know, you're not going to find, unless you've got somebody that takes you someplace.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to get your medical care. And so we look at poverty and homelessness, and we look at all of these issues, and inequality is so systemic. There are so many things that feed into it, and there are so many things that need adjustment or change.
So I just have sort of a general question. When we were talking about what forum to have here, one reason that they chose this is that a new study just came out that says income inequality is at its highest that it's been, I think since the Great Depression is the stat of that. So we hear all these things, unemployment is down, people are off of Medicaid because they don't need it, all kinds of things. Why do you think inequality is at its highest? What do you think is the most contributing factor at this point in time? Was that clear?
Yes.
Okay. Many questions merged into one.
Yeah.
Well, giving tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans hasn't helped anything. We know that. And we know that other countries have been looking at us for some time and wondering when it was going to start to fall apart. I had the opportunity, I think it was in about 2015, I was on vacation and I was doing some hiking, and a woman was there who was from Canada. And she said, "What are you going to do about income inequalities in your country?" And I hadn't thought about it at that point in time. Now I'm doing a lot of thinking about it. So, you know, I think we have to recognize that this has been a long simmering problem. And, you know, it's just not acceptable that 1% of the country controls it in so many ways. And there's so many people that do without. You know, and I know that, you know, that gets us into, you know, people don't, you know, we don't want to give away services to other people. We want them to earn it and all those kinds of things. You know, it says in the Bible, "Poor will always be among us." So we will always have people that will not be able to function at the capacity that the society would want them to. But we do have people whose circumstances dictate that they do need help. I had a young woman that I met down in, I believe it was in Eminence, and she'd never voted. She hadn't registered to vote. And she had recently taken on her niece and nephew who were from a mother that had just died of an overdose from opioid products. And the well dried up. The husband got hurt, not on his job, but at home. And he was laid off for 3 months. And she said, "I don't need to be like my sister. She was on welfare. I don't want to be her. But I sure needed some help for 6 months." And she said, "You know what? I would have gladly paid it back if I would have had it." And I thought, you know, and she said, "And I'm nobody. I have nothing to say." And I said, "No, you are you are the right person for me to talk to. Because this is another example of how we can help somebody temporarily. We don't need to help them permanently. We can give them that lift up that gets them moving. And if they need help along the way, then we can be there for them. It's not somebody that's going to be on it all the time, although that is very often necessary. But some people just need it for a little while. I think we need to look at the way that we provide services a little bit differently.
Well, that was so well put. Yeah, I think for me, I think the biggest contributing factor is just viewing people as other. That's what I see that's the difference, is people view them as them. You know, they view people that are in that lower bracket as other than that are not the same, do not deserve the same things for whatever reason. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's saying the biggest problem is kind of a hard one. I mean, maybe what I would add on to that, right, is that sort of the things that we can do at the local level to sort of support growth and to kind of combat income inequality, right, is sort of making sure to find those kinds of private-public partnerships, right, whether that's to bring in companies that can offer good, steady jobs with benefits, whether that's sort of the kinds of helping people find training that we can find through these sort of university structures like we have here in Rolla, and also just, affordable housing, right? The ways that we can encourage the building of affordable housing in communities like Rolla that will help people on, fixed incomes or in other sorts of circumstances. I turned it to the solution.
Yeah, no, that was my next question. So you're ahead of the game. So we talked about why are we sort of in this circumstance. What is something that you all would propose at the grassroots level? So this might be closer to what you're working on daily, actually. That could combat this issue. So just grassroots. Don't steal my next question.
Oh boy, do I have ideas. So my personal slogan is kind of that I'm boldly naive. So I think that on the ground level, we can just start taking care of our own. We can start taking care of the people in our community, our neighbors. 15.6% of our neighbors here in Phelps County don't live with enough food in their home. And so when we have organizations like the Mission and Grace and the Salvation Army and all these other amazing nonprofits in town, supporting them, volunteering, helping out, helping them, even coming and helping, those are the things that make the difference. It's neighbors helping neighbors. And that's what I've seen that makes the biggest difference so far, that really gets people out of poverty and out of their circumstance.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to that, it can be through the sort of formal ways that we see with nonprofits like the Mission, like some of the others we have here in town. But yeah, just even within the neighborhoods, right, watching out for each other, stopping by, finding out what's going on with someone, right? What I got to learn about by talking with some of my constituents, really seeing the ways that, people are checking in on each other, people are making sure people are safe and cared for, and that's just, something that I think all of us want to do, and some of us do better than others, and that we can all work on doing better.
My mother was a third grade teacher, and she started out teaching in a 2-room schoolhouse in House Springs, Missouri, and she was also working on her degree. You could do that at that point in time. They needed teachers so badly. And one of the things that she had to do, she had a class, her first year of teaching, she had a class of 40 students. And it was everything from genius all the way down to, 50 IQ, something like that. All kinds of kids. And very often those kids would be hungry. They would often be, their clothes would be just falling off them. They're what we were used to call, that they come from the holler. And they kind of crawl out about 3 days a week for school, and the rest of the time they'd never make it because they didn't even know where their parents were. So many times those kids would end up at our dinner table that evening. Because my mother believed that one of the things that you could do, that the highest calling that you had, is when somebody's in trouble, you help them. And so many times they went home with a different set of clothes on than they had when they came there, because she kept a whole little pile of clothes that she could put on them, because they didn't need to have that shame. They could walk into school, they could have something new for a change. And so we used to live like that very simply. And somewhere along the way, I think we lost that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I went into social work, is because I saw it at my dinner table often 2 or 3 times a week, and that was the right thing to do. How do we change the culture once again to get back to that time when we can really be of help at a shelter? We can serve in so many ways, in the public sector, in the private sector. I sit on a domestic violence board in Jefferson County, and we have done the impossible. We had a shelter for many years, and of course, since there's no money on the federal level that really gives much money at all to domestic violence shelters, which is a whole other issue that I'm very concerned about, you do with what you can. So last year we had over 1,000 people that women and children that we had to turn away from our shelter just in Jefferson County alone. We managed to find places for them. But a few years back, we decided that we wanted to have the will and the ability to create an intermediate shelter that would house women and children for up to 2 years. And we know that with domestic violence, we know that by the time that you come back to a shelter the 7th time, and if you leave again, you're either going to be successful or you're going to be dead. So to stop that cycle of going in and out of a shelter, we wanted to build these facilities. So as of the end of this year, we have reached our goal of over $1 million to build a 4-plex that will house women and children for up to 2 years. We are working with the junior college in Jefferson County. We are working with just about every employer we can. We are working to get these women and these families back together again, functioning together so that they can go out in the world and be successful. They have every kind of counseling that they would need. And so when we come together as a community, and this was very much a community-based effort, when we come together, we can do amazing things. And so think about what you can do for this shelter, what you can do with these people. And get to know them. I've worked with people that have been mentally ill. I've worked with addicts all of my life. They have illnesses. They can get better. They just need help until they can get to that point that they can launch on their own. So when you look at it on that level, on that grassroots level, then you want to think about what do you do from the federal level. Well, you want to have some policies that are going to help those people. You want to help those policies that are going to help those citizens in those communities help those people. You want to have common sense that says you do what the next right thing is.
No one will take it. Kathy, I have a follow-up question for you. And folks, please submit questions. We have lots of time still. So.
Could you watch it?
Okay, good. We have questions. Yeah. Got it. Kathy, can you talk a little bit about how have state and federal policies increased wealth inequality?
Increased wealth.
Increased. How have they made them worse?
Well, I think we only have to look to our own state to see what's going on. I mean, I don't know how many more tax cuts they can give us before we finally just roll over and die. I mean, we're not taking care of our people. We have 100,000 kids that got kicked off the Medicaid rolls. And the only answer that I got from any of the legislators was it was an accounting error. No, it wasn't an accounting error. It's like if we can get more people off, then we're going to not have to pay them. They are shutting down all of the things that we have valued in terms of mental health care and drug and alcohol. It's all the budgets are getting slashed. The budgets are getting slashed in our rural hospitals. There is no help anymore that is from the state level. We have a lot of good legislators that are trying really, really hard to do what they can to help people, and they are shot down at every opportunity. And so I think that, it's cruel and it's unusual punishment for people that really didn't do anything except be sick or be homeless or be without enough money. And so I think we need to really look at how we can, realize that we can see that our economy is better if we have healthy people. Our economy is better if they can go to the doctor, if they can get good educations. We win with that. We're giving away billions of dollars because we haven't expanded Medicaid. Every state around us is benefiting from that, and we're getting left with nothing. So it's time that we do those kinds of things to help those people here and start to build toward a good economy in this state that's going to be welcoming to everybody, that's going to bring in good jobs in our rural areas. I think that we need to have something that's like a new deal for rural areas, because by golly, we have been overlooked forever. And it's time that they started paying attention. I've been talking to a lot of people on the national level, and I'm telling them, you gotta come to the rural areas. That's where the need is the greatest. And you need to do something now. So that wasn't an answer to how you do it, but you get good policies to make sure that people's needs are met.
But by the way, why don't you throw it open to questions from the people here?
Sure, yeah, we can do that. Before we do that though, there's something that I failed to do earlier, and she's still in the back. I am so sorry. Would you like to come up and say, so she's actually here to talk about Medicaid expansion, and Kathy did a nice intro into that, so I promised her I'd let her come up first, and I forgot, so. No, take your time.
I'm Ann Murphy. I also am on City Council Ward 2. Just have to get somebody else here. But I have been working with Missouri Healthcare for All for several years, and we are in the process now of trying to get the issue on the 2020 ballot to expand Medicaid in Missouri. It's been tried twice and it's failed, okay? At this point, we've got about 200,000 individuals that would qualify for Medicaid if it was expanded. The fact is that a family of two can't make over $23,000 a year and be eligible. $23,000 a year for a family, mortgage, insurance is nothing. But even more astounding, people that are adults who are underemployed, really employed, maybe in that mental health category, they make more than $2,900 a year. They do not qualify for Medicaid in our state, and that's despicable. So the thing is, right now, the federal government has allocated $1.5 billion to Missouri for Medicaid expansion, as they have done in other states around the country. And the money that we do not get because of not passing Medicaid expansion, my understanding is it goes to those other states, okay? It gets broken down. So we've gone years without the help that we could so desperately need to keep hospitals open, to keep care clinics open, to keep people a little bit more healthy. So I've got petitions back there. I'd like to encourage you and ask you to sign a petition to get this issue on the November ballot 2020. We're trying to push here through December to get an encouraging amount of people around the state that will encourage people to continue to work on this effort. I don't know when the deadline is, April, May, or something. You know, we've got some time to go, but I'm going to try at every opportunity, and some of the folks that I work with will also try to be around and assist in that measure. You might see us from time to time in different places, but thank you. Phelps County, Marys County, Dent County, anything we can make a petition, a ballot petition for any of those folks, any of those counties. Okay, thank you.
Thank
So
you.
the petitions are back there, we can sign them tonight?
Right.
Yes, petitions are in the back if you'd like to sign them. See, and if you're interested in collecting those signatures, I imagine you could also chat with her about that. We've had the Missouri Healthcare for All folks coming with us to most of our forums. So Dennis is actually who texted me with that earlier question. He's their statewide organizer. So if you have questions, reach out to them. I can connect you with some of the other folks too. So, okay. Yes, questions?
Question. How much of the state budget is earmarked for Medicaid at this point?
That I do not know, but we can look into. Does anyone know how much of the state level budget is earmarked for Medicaid currently? No? Okay, see me after, we'll look it up, we'll find out. We don't do much with Medicaid expansion because it is at the state level at this point, so though we support it as a campaign for sure. Other questions? Yes, sir.
my impression is that most or maybe even all the people here are willing to help in some way.
Yeah.
What I would look for from you guys up there, would you have any specific guidance? So right now, it's sort of diffuse, the willingness to help. If you would come up with, say, some priorities, could you specify?
You probably have very direct advice.
Yeah, so if you want to help here on the local level, I would encourage you to donate food, coats, to come in and volunteer. There are lots of organizations in town, including the Mission, that are run by volunteers mostly. You could, oh my goodness, there are just so many things you can do. Yeah, there's like the backpack program. There are a lot of opportunities here locally to help our neighbors in need. And if you want to come see me, I can find a job for you. But yeah, we can always, at the Mission, any donations of food, hygiene products, even monetary donations to help pay the phone bill or the electric bill or something, all of those are very appreciated.
Can I ask, how much money does the Mission have to operate with?
So our annual budget is $145,000.
So let's say somebody would need some help, $100 in order to get through some temporary crisis.
Uh-huh.
Would you be able to help them?
So we don't duplicate services that anyone else does. So Grace is an organization here in town that helps people with financial resources like that.
Okay, thank you.
One other thing that I would say is to, volunteer for, in some of these places, but also think about volunteering on their boards. Because we're always looking for good board members, and it's not that hands-on thing necessarily, but it's a way that you can direct the policy. And, I think you have a much greater opportunity of being heard by legislators if you ask them, hey, what are you going to do about helping this shelter here, or whatever the non-for-profit is. And so I think that by doing that, you can really, raise that standard and say, look, there are people here that really want something done, because it really makes a difference. I learned how to be on boards from my dad, who said when he finally retired and that he would never go to another board meeting in his life.
I'm going to add something, even though I'm not a panelist. Run for office.
Yeah.
If you have questions about how to do that, I know there's some good folks in this room that would help you do so. We need people at every single level running for office that care about these issues. We have a city council person here that would be happy to talk with you, I am sure.
Yeah.
We have someone running for Congress. I know there are folks in this room who have thought about it. Please, 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 please run for office.
And vote.
And vote, of course.
And I invite anybody that wants to see if they like running for office to ride with me throughout the district, and you'll get an idea.
I have an answer to the Medicaid question. It looks like currently $9.9 billion is spent on Medicaid in the state, according to this.
What percentage is
Of the budget, that I don't know. My little Google page does not say. We will have to look that. Oh wait, hang on.
Oh.
It is on there. It is. I take 36% of the state budget.
Yeah.
Thank you, Beth.
That is with zero Medicaid expansion dollars.
Yes, and we have some of the worst state outcomes as far as healthcare goes. I will add that. Thank you. This is Beth. I'm sure many of you all know Beth, but now she's our resident researcher. So 36%.
36?
That's what that page says.
That's from Ballotpedia?
Yeah, that's from Ballotpedia. Question, yes?
All of these things are wonderful, and obviously, maybe the best way to start with anything is baby steps.
Sure.
But is there any central location where I could go to say, what are the needs that I can look through and say, gee, I'm not interested in helping people not have athlete's foot, but I've got a great passion to teach them how to grow their food, or sew their clothes, or, you know, figure out why they don't want to work some of the places I've worked. But something where I could just go and look and, or the places I could donate money. I mean, I know I can give to the mission. I know I can give to Grace. There are lots of places, but where I could sort of go through and get a feel for, hey, that interests me.
That's a good question. I know that MOCA has a resource catalog that has like all the various nonprofits and what they offer. So maybe you could look through that and see what strikes you. And then researching online, just kind of typing in like some of those keywords and nonprofits. Or the health department as well. I know they're pretty connected with a lot of organizations as well.
Or maybe we could find one of those brilliant students from the university who'd be willing to build a web page.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's a great idea.
That's almost like a class project that someone should make up.
I love it.
I teach research and writing after all, so that could be a research thing that they could learn a lot about, I'm sure.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That was a very thoughtful question.
Yeah.
What other questions do we have, folks? We've got a few minutes left.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Well, what's being done for vocational training?
Yeah, that's a great question. Who wants to tackle that?
Because not everyone goes to college.
Oh, absolutely.
And we need people that know how to fix things.
Yep,
Yeah.
for sure.
The young people don't know how to fix their own car.
Sure.
They don't know how to build things,
Yeah,
but they know how to, write paperwork.
Yeah. Do you want to start?
Well, one of the things that I've been told and that I've observed is that, like all of education, it's being cut back. We still have the unions that provide good training, but, everything that I've seen, just to survive, they're cutting away anything that they, is not being utilized in the way that it needs to. I think there's also a bit of a stigma about, if you go to, everybody says go to college, go to college, go to college. Well, not everybody goes to college.
Yeah.
And not everybody should go to college.
Yep.
Some people are very talented in ways that they don't realize, and they can earn a very good living that way. And so I think we need to look at how we're packaging education and really look at, wait a minute, it's everything. We need people for everything, technical, regular vocational stuff, and college level. So I think, we've got some work to do with that.
We've lost our manufacturing many decades ago.
Yeah.
Because I was in the cusp of that.
Yeah.
And I can see how that has affected people's ability to do anything.
Yeah.
I see it every day.
Yeah.
And-
Well, but we've got the light, I think, on the horizon is also what can come of the technology for dealing with our environmental issues. We've got a lot of opportunity there that I think we want to, begin to look at that as a viable option.
Do you want to add anything for vocational training?
Oh.
You don't have to.
Well, I was going to add, actually. I mean, there are financial resources, scholarships and stuff, statewide, locally, for people to go to technical schools. And sometimes I think from what I understand, there's a lot that the counselors try to do at Rolla to help students learn about those opportunities, to help them connect with resources, to get that kind of technical training if they would rather do that than go to college, right? But again, awareness, right? As you said, people don't realize, or not if everybody gets pushed to college, and I believe in college, there are a lot of people that just, would be happier doing something else, right? And I know there's a lot of employers locally, like a friend of mine who has a heating and cooling business, right? And yeah, he's looking to hire people all the time, who know how to do it, and
Well, that's
he
the
has
thing.
to help train them.
We've lost the people that could do that.
Yeah.
And they keep focusing on college education,
Mhm.
which is not affordable.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely.
People can't afford it. They're in debt for their whole life. What a way to live.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Mhm.
other questions, comments, thoughts? I think we just have maybe a couple minutes left. People want them? Yes. Oh, 2 questions.
Go ahead. Whether a mission or so should they offer 6 months certificates to different people, and just to make them, like more eligible for jobs or various.
Can you repeat the question?
Sorry, I can. Like short time certificates.
Reading you might have I think it's about job certification.
Just wondering if the mission or other programs consider giving like 6 month certificates, some kind of a short trainings. That might make them more eligible for the jobs or.
Yeah?
Run it over.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So again, like I said earlier, the mission does not duplicate any services, especially ones that are being done well. And we have the Missouri Career Center here in town that helps connect people to that resource of getting that certificate. And just a couple months ago, there was a career fair held here in town where they were actually giving that work keys test for people to get that career readiness certificate. And we were at that event. And in fact, we bussed people over from the mission to that event so that everyone would have the opportunity to take that test. So anytime we try to always connect people to that resource that would like it.
There was a question in the back, I think.
This question is mostly for Kathy. When you get to DC, what relative to income inequality will be your priorities?
Leslie's
Sorry.
Thank you, Leslie.
Well, I'm going to look at the policies that we've got currently, which is, it seems to be that it's all moving all of the income to the upper level. But I think it's also looking at issues like, we've talked about in various areas how helpful it would be when a child is born that a certain amount of money is put in an account, so that begins that process of, parents can add to it, but there is money that's going to be at some point in time available, whether that's used for education. I think there's some really interesting ideas that people have about how we can begin to think about wealth as opposed to income. And I think that, that means how do we let people, even from the very beginning when kids are pretty young, how do we teach them about how they handle their money? That doesn't come, if it comes at all, it's in high school. And, I think that's one of the things that we can do is give kids at an earlier age a better opportunity to have a good start. So that would be something I would be very interested in. And then all of the programs that are a part of that, beginning to change that. We also have to look at, it is not right that the people that are at the 1% are in charge of everything and have as much money as they have. That is depriving everybody of what they need. There is no balance. And I think we need to have a better idea of the balance. And if it takes something, where we have to look at the tax structure, we have to do that. So there are many things that we could do that I would be very, very interested in finding out as much about them as possible, because there's a lot of drill down into the details that right now I don't know. And I'm going to have to find out. Thank you.
I know in St. Louis they do those child savings accounts and have had grand success in them so far. So I think that's an interesting idea. Other questions as we wrap up?
Yes, please. Before we leave, I just want to thank our panelists for coming and to informing us. It's been so informative, and I know I've learned a lot. And I'd like to thank you all for coming. I know Marcia and I really appreciate your participation and your interest. We think it's something that's very important. We see a lot of struggling people in our community, and we really need to do something to help lift them up. And I know some of you have expressed interest in getting involved. Please look into ways to get involved. There are a lot of things that you can do. There are so many organizations and so many people that that are doing things to help others, and please get involved. They would love to have your help. So I just wanted to say thank you so much.
Thanks. And Leslie and Marcia, thank you so much for organizing this. It was a truly great event. Our goal with these forums was to start sparking conversations that we think don't happen enough in these communities. So we have about 5 of these over the next couple of months. We're at, I think, 12 scheduled, so we're busy folks, but it's a good problem to have. So I know this is a bit far, but our next one is in St. Genevieve on Social Security. If any of you are on Facebook, I know St. Gen is a bit of a drive from here, but we do live stream all of our events. Facebook is Kathy Ellis for Congress. Our website is ellisforcongress.com. This is the only one we have scheduled in the Rolla area, but if any of you are brave enough to decide to do this yourselves, I'm sure Leslie and Marcia could talk about that more, but we'd love to have some more in the area as well. So keep an eye out. Thank you all so much for coming and being on our panel. It was spectacular. I think that's all we got. We have Medicaid expansion petitions in the back. If you have questions, we'll hang around. Thank you all. Stay warm.
Nice to see you again.